Oh, yeah, that's no good.
Okay, we are broadcasting now.
Broadcasting. Casting all the broads.
That's not an inappropriate thing to say.
It was? I do that sometimes. Lots of times.
Okay. So we'll wait a little bit and then we'll kick it off.
So we can cut that out.
Yeah. We don't want that being. Well, actually, it's going to be permanent on YouTube, so
I don't care.
yeah.
Come at me, bro.
Come on,
Or or sis.
or sis. Got to cover them all.
Gotta cover them all. I'm inclusive in my threats and posturing.
Okay. Just waiting. I think. I really want someone to be like, "Hey, I'm listening."
Of course, I get a phone call.
Yeah.
I'm just
Always.
gonna make sure that everyone's okay. Okay.
Is everybody okay?
Yeah. This week at school for the kids is Grandparents' Day,
Uh,
which apparently means I have to wake up early and bring donuts to school.
yeah. Well, I mean, naturally,
Naturally, that's what.
that stuff means, right?
So yeah. So I asked. I said, I said I was just gonna go to Dunkin' Donuts and grab a dozen donuts and bring them. Whatever. I said, is that what you were expecting? And she said, well, they need to last until Friday. I guess that's when they're actually going to eat them. And and I'm like, well, Dunkin' Donuts don't even last like an hour, so I'm bringing Dunkin' Donuts. That's what I'm doing. But whatever happens to them on Friday is between the grandparents and their teeth,
Teeth.
as
So
if
we've,
they have
we've
some.
added we've added a new segment to Loosely Couple podcast. It's called
Matt's
listening to
awkward,
Matt's awkward phone calls.
yeah, Matt's awkwardly timed phone call,
Yeah,
volume one.
cool. All right, so I think we can go and kick this one off.
Let's kick it.
We've messed around enough, I think. Okay,
I don't know.
this is episode 13, right? Yes.
Is it?
I gotta
Okay.
keep
Ooh,
checking. I have to keep
lucky
checking.
13, dude.
Yeah,
Or is
lucky.
13 unlucky?
I don't know. I guess it's lucky.
Should
It's
we
lucky
do
today.
should we should we do like a hotel elevator and just
Or
like
just
skip
13.
13?
No, let's keep it because I already wrote it.
Okay.
Okay. Glad we got that covered.
All right, I'm on board with that.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the Loosely Couple podcast, episode 13, interviews and job descriptions. I am your co-host, Jeff, and this is Matt. And today we're going to be talking about looking at job descriptions, what to do with the interview, how it goes, maybe some stories about some fun things we've experienced. I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. So, how are you tonight, Matt?
I am wonderful. My eyes are protected. My head is protected. I had a pretty good day today. I'm ready to rock and roll and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, apparently the upper portion of the room is freezing cold in Matt's place. So,
Yes, I don't even have socks on, so yes, it's very warm on the floor. It's almost Amazonian on the floor.
I mean, that's cool because we've actually been experiencing some frigid temperatures. It got down to like 79, I
Oh,
think,
you
the other
poor
day
thing.
here in Texas.
Yeah,
So
it was 42 yesterday.
we all had to get out our snow gear and
Yeah,
put it on
yeah.
just in case we didn't want to get frostbite. So
It's better to be safe than sorry.
that's true, definitely. I mean, that's your philosophy with the sunglasses at night.
Yeah,
So
I commend you on your
yeah,
preparedness.
it's just a different type of preparedness, I guess. Right. So interviews, right? Job descriptions.
Yeah,
It's been
it's a fun
something
topic.
recent in your life and also in mine for different reasons, but
Yeah.
thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about.
I think it will be. I think we're going to have fun with this because I think between the two of us, um, we probably have some pretty good stories and some pretty good advice.
Yeah, of course, some of them we can't talk about, but we still have them.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the awkward thing about this topic is it's like how much do you want to disclose?
Yeah.
It's tough to.
Well, maybe we should throw that out there now. Why don't we say, since I know I don't have uh, permission, nor have I given any of these people that have interviewed me in the past a heads up that I'm going to talk about them. Um, I'm going to talk about the situations and leave the company's
Yeah,
name or interviewer's name. I'm just going to change it. No, I'm not going to change it. I just won't say it.
that's probably a good idea. Yeah, change some of the specifics, the timelines, and stuff like that. Yeah, just because. So anyway, job descriptions. I think I'd like to start there. What do you think?
Yeah, that comes first in the process. So I think that's a good
Yeah.
pragmatic way to go about it.
Cool. So, one thing I find interesting, I guess, is there's so many different styles that people go for with with how they're trying to attract you to their company or whatever, and you
Hmm.
see a lot. Like you'll see, some people focus really heavily on the physical perks that they have, and then some people are. It looks like they're looking for a unicorn developer who has been around for 40 years and experienced everything from, punch cards to, the latest greatest node whatever. And it's like, what is it that you want me to do? I don't really know how to read this job description.
My favorite are those ones where they're looking for the unicorn developer with 40 years of experience in PHP 6 and want to pay you an entry level salary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's always an interesting one too. That's there's a good topic actually. The
Okay.
salary thing. So, you look at a job description and typically it'll just say depends on experience
Yes.
or whatever. And that's not always been my experience with with job offers. It's generally it's generally a thing it depends on our budget more than it depends on your experience concept.
Yes, that's true. I've had that
And
same similar experience.
yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, you know, if I wanted to apply for a job that had, seven different technologies in the front and back end plus ops work plus a whole bunch of stuff, I would be expecting the experience side or expecting the compensation based on experience because
Hmm.
I have such a broad general approach to things to be higher than if they were asking for just someone who does back end stuff. But then you have to think about it and you're like,
Right.
well, if the job description is catering towards a generalist,
Hmm.
probably want you to be like, the developer or like, someone that that is, oh, we can throw anything at this person and they'll do it. So in their mind, they're going to pay you less because you're not a specialist, right? I mean,
Right.
that's just been my experience. Is when you apply for a job that's more generic, it tends to come with lower or with expectations of lower compensation. Like that's just how I've experienced things.
Yeah, my experiences have been similar. When I first got into the job market all those years ago, it was very common to see job descriptions with the salary range on it.
It's true.
That, at least in my experience in the last couple of years, probably the last 3 or 4 years, that has kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
Um, which I think, like for me was always good because when I first got out of college, I'm like, yeah, I want to make 80,000. I'll apply for this job. I only had 35 years experience PHP 6, which is why I didn't get it.
Yeah. Should have
Um,
gotten into Unicode earlier, man.
I know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I used to be really skeptical, right? Because if you go in, anytime in the last 4 or 5 years, you go into an interview, right? You look at this job description, you decide to apply,
Yeah.
right? One of the first things that they ask you, or one of the things they ask you, is what your salary range is, which is essentially, are you valuing yourself in a range where we can afford you?
Yeah.
And my experience, with very few exceptions, there have been some, but my experience is, let's just throw two random numbers out there. Um, if you give a range from 60 to 70, right, $1,000 a year,
Yeah.
you're going to get like no more than 62 or 63.
I'd say it's probably accurate. I mean, and that's. I mean, it makes sense from the business side. Like, it makes sense from a company side. Like, if somebody comes out and tells you, I think I'm worth between $60,000 and $70,000, it makes sense for you to put a number in between 60 and 70, and then from a negotiation standpoint, it makes sense to put on the lower end of that, so that if you came to me and you were like, I think I'm worth between 60 and 70 grand a year, and I'm like, all right, I'll pay you 62,000, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I was hoping more for something like 65. Now I've got you for 65, right? Where I could have probably paid you up to 70. Like, it really
Right.
depends. So it makes sense, and that's why
Right.
those questions are kind of tricky on whether you want to answer them. And then the other thing that I think
Yeah.
is
Well, I mean, you have to
interesting.
answer what your salary range. I mean, you have to. I mean, you don't have to tell them your salary history necessarily, but I mean, when
Yeah,
they ask you how much you want to get paid, I mean, I would assume if you don't answer, they'd be like, "Oh, cool, he was working for free." I
yeah. I,
mean,
I don't know.
I mean, you
There's
have to
there's
answer that.
You don't have to answer it. I disagree that you have to answer. Like, this.
Okay, you don't have to answer anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to give them a range. You can always spin it back, and I mean, what you're really interested in is what they feel like that position is worth, because that's going to
Right.
tell you a lot
Right.
about the company and how they value people. So if I were in a situation and someone were asking me, well, what do you think you're worth as a programmer? I would immediately turn that around and say, I mean, we're not talking about what I'm worth, because obviously, to me, I'm priceless or whatever. But uh,
$1 million a year.
yeah, $1 billion a year is what you should be paying me. But what I want to know is, like, what is this role worth to the business? Like, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Okay.
what is someone successfully executing these responsibilities on a day-to-day basis? What is that worth to the company? And that's how you figure out, like, where. And they're going to, they'd be dumb if they were like, well, truthfully, this is worth $250,000 a year, but we only want to pay you 50 grand. But they're going to give you a number, and then
Right.
when you decide, yeah, I don't want to be in that range, or that range is, not what I felt like I should be compensated for doing that specific role or whatever. So you have to take. I guess what I'm saying is, take the the person out of it. Like, take the personal attachment that you have to yourself and your self-worth, and take it from, this is how much I'm worth, and make it more, this is how much the work that I'd be doing is worth. Like,
Right.
that's kind of the difference. Is it's not really
Yeah.
about you or even about the company. It's about the job, right? I don't know. That's my point.
No, I think that that's the one thing I think it's easy to lose sight of, and I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that part about the job, because I think it's um, you're going into this, right. So you read a job description and you say, hey, I fit most of these requirements pretty well. Because I mean, I don't know that I've ever had a job that I've hit all the requirements with.
Yeah.
Like, we want all this experience and all that, and in some cases I just haven't been alive that long. Um, but
Maybe you should get some better experience in life then.
well, I think that goes without saying. I think that's pretty much yeah. Anyway, but right. So you do this. You fill this out, right? You get a phone call or an email or something back saying, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about this position that you applied for," right? And so from the get-go, um, by the time you fill that out, you'll send your resume, whatever. Some places still have you fill out an actual application, which I think is hilarious. Um,
You mean like the applications like put your
yeah,
driver's license number here.
yes.
Oh,
They're like,
your
put
your
your
resume.
salary range. I'm like, we just literally talked about this. Like literally, like 2 seconds before you handed me this form, you asked me how much money I wanted to make,
Hey man,
and
legal
and I
department.
told you.
Legal departments are serious business, man.
Yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. But right. So at that point, you're all like up and high and excited, and hey, I'm gonna, grab the world by the haunches, and you kind of lose sight, or at least I lose sight of. I'm not going to speak for everyone listening, but I lose sight of the fact sometimes that you're making a business transaction. Like if you were selling your car, right, and somebody lowballed you on an offer, you'd want to counter them with a much higher offer. They're doing the same thing, right? You're the car salesman and you're selling yourself. That sounds wrong. You're selling your skills, and
I don't know what
the
kind of jobs you're applying for, dude, but
yeah, we'll get that later. Um, and the employer is that like creepy guy that shows up in his truck and like looks at the car like from every weird angle that you would never inspect a car from. Like muffler looks good, like, and lowballs you, right? They're trying to get the car for the cheapest amount possible, and you're trying to sell the car for the most that you can, and you're basically you're doing that same thing except for with your skills, and you're entering into a business transaction,
yeah.
and
I mean, yeah,
you're all like,
I would argue that if an employer, a potential employer, reminds you anything of that sleazy guy who comes and
yeah,
shows up
okay,
to buy your car and is like, I know your ad said this is a 2010 car with low mileage and you're the only owner, yada yada, but all I brought with me is $1,000 cash. Do you want it? Like if your employer is like that, like if you walk in someplace and it's a
okay,
senior
well,
level role, I'm just saying if you walk in a place and it's a senior level role and you feel like they're lowballing you, I mean
yeah.
that's time to walk away. That's not
No,
time to like expose
absolutely.
yourself.
But if I had said you're selling your car and a completely reasonable man walks up to you and asks you for a fair price for the car and has the money on him, then the metaphor would really suck.
No, I think that's even better. He has the money on him, right? That's perfect. That's
Right.
what's
No, that's a good
happening.
that's a good car transaction, but
No,
that's
that's
not
what's happening in the job though. All right, anyway, continue.
okay. Anyway. So the point that I was trying to make before we got into this sleazy car guy business was I don't even know now
You don't even
was
remember.
was that they're trying to get you for as little as they can get you for, and you're
Yeah.
trying to get as much money out of them as you can, and you have this. You're at a disadvantage because you're going into this situation, especially if you're inexperienced in doing it. You're going into this situation with that feeling of euphoria, like they want me, they want to hire me. We're sitting here talking about money. That's right. I mean, I know when I've interviewed people, I don't talk about money with people that I have no intention to hire.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah,
talking
that's
about
true.
money, and you're like, they want me, and my tendency, because I'm a people pleaser, um, is to be like, oh, I don't want to throw out a number that maybe they're not going to like, and maybe lose the job because of that, because I wanted $80,000 a year. Maybe that's too high. And again, I think to your other point, if you ask that up front, like what you think the position is worth, you have a little bit better idea of where you can kind of slide in there.
Yeah.
But
And
if you don't do that, you're like, I always second guess myself. Like I'm going to ask for 80. 80 seems fair. That's what I think I'm worth. But I'll like panic and be like, oh yeah, between 60 and 70. And then they're like, okay, how about 58? And I'm like, deal.
Yeah. You're like, yes. Where do I sign? No. Yeah, and I think to that end, I think we're at a really good time for job seekers for this type of thing because, I mean, the market is interesting. We'll just say that. So, recruiters, like this is a topic that
Oh
I don't
yeah.
really want to get too far into, but recruiters can be a very useful tool to you when,
Like for jokes and tweets.
yes, they are endless, endless entertainment. For example, I had a guy who messaged me earlier and wanted to know if I could connect him with people in South Florida who are looking for a job in South Florida, and I'm like,
In Fort
uh,
Lauderdale.
I don't remember where
Because
exactly.
we might have been in competition for the same
Oh,
position
maybe.
there.
But he wasn't interested in me though. I don't think he just wanted to know if I knew anyone in the area, and I'm just like, no. I mean, I live in Texas, so
I live
like,
in Cleveland. I don't. I literally living in Cleveland is a prerequisite for knowing like no one.
yeah. So
Like it's
anyway,
a vacuum.
so recruiters can be a very useful tool, especially if it's been an open position for a time or enough time, I guess, where you can ask them, what salary are people who this company is talking to making, and that's usually a good indicator. So like if you talk to a recruiter and they tell you, well, most of the people that they've actually asked to speak with as a result of our efforts are making in the, let's say, 100 to $110,000 range, then you
Hmm.
know that the position is likely in that caliber, in that range,
Yes.
most likely, because these are the people that are in the market, that they satisfy the hiring manager or whoever's screening. They satisfy their curiosity or whatever, and they're interested in
Hmm.
these people. So that's what you can kind of expect, something in there. So then if you then go into the interview and get an offer or something, and it's way below, or hopefully not
75 or
so below,
something.
but if it's like 70,000, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I mean, I think so that's another useful way to get that information without having to make it that awkward
Right.
conversation at the beginning or at the end of negotiations, like, well, wait, I'm worth this, and like, it's an easier way to get
Right.
it. So it is, I think, beneficial to know that kind of information up front. So if you happen to be
Yeah.
working through a recruiter, ask them that question.
Yeah. I think. I mean, obviously, I totally agree. I think the more information that you can arm yourself with going into a situation like this, the better off you'll be. As we all know, and as I alluded to before, you just described all that. Um, Finding a good recruiter is a different story. They do exist. There are some, um, but most of my experiences with recruiters, especially recruiters that I just found, um, I think in order to go in and feel confident about the information that they're giving you,
Yeah,
there has to be an element of trust because the same way companies try to make their jobs sound awesome, they want a rock star ninja unicorn uh, person or centaur or whatever that ends up being. Um, the recruiters are going to do the same thing because they get paid when you get placed,
yeah,
and so they're going to, like for me, I would have a hard time going to a recruiter that I didn't know or that wasn't recommended to me. And I mean, unless the interactions were like crazy positive,
yeah,
um, really believing anything that they were telling me.
yeah. I mean, but at the same time, recruiting firms at least are often contracted by companies. So
Right.
I mean, you would have, maybe everything goes through the recruiter or whatever. So you have to. I mean, I wouldn't really say avoid recruiters. I would say that,
No, I wouldn't say avoid them either. I'd just do your homework on them.
yeah, which is sometimes hard to do. Like, how do you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I worked with, and I'm going to go ahead and name drop here because my experience with recruiters has overwhelmingly not been good, but the few positive experiences that I have had, um, I got a recommendation to work with Lonnie Brown. I wish I knew the name of his new company, but I don't.
Isn't it like PHP Dev hired or something?
Oh, maybe that's what it is. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, PHP Dev hired. Lonnie was great to work with, and I got a recommendation for a recruiter down in Nashville, Scott Gordon,
Yeah, Gordon. Yeah.
um, and like he got me interviews like the same day I talked to him, like multiple interviews the same day I talked to him, and knows his stuff, and I think that's rather than just name dropping and uh, talking these two up, they deserve to be talked up because they do their job well and they work hard to stay uh, knowledgeable and keep their finger on the pulse. So those are the kind of things that you want, though. You don't want that recruiter that's just trying to place people nonstop. You want a recruiter that's going to community tech events, that's active in the community circles on social media, that's coming with good recommendations from other people that you trust. So throwing your resume up, I don't even know if this is still a thing. Last time I said that I got in trouble. Um, cyber coders, is that still a thing?
I have
Ever heard of
I've
that?
actually seen that name recently, probably from LinkedIn email somewhere. So I would say yes, it is. It is still a thing.
Okay, just like Drupal, we got that squared away.
We're not saying that cybercoders and Drupal are the same
No,
thing.
we're just saying that they're both things.
Yeah.
Um, but no, what I was what I was
I
going to
mean, I
say
don't know.
before
Maybe cybercoders works with Drupal. I don't know.
that could hey, you
That's
never know.
pure
Never know.
speculation, but I think it's a thing.
I think it's a thing. But what I was going to say is you're going to have a lot more luck going through recommendations
Yeah.
and finding people at local events than you are uploading your resume to cybercoders.
Yeah.
Or not to pick on them, any of those, hey, give us your resume, we'll find you a job.
Yeah, that's always awkward, and those are the kind of recruiter situations that I avoid like the plague. It's more, if there were a job that I'm interested in that I learned about through recruiter or whatever, I would talk to those people. Or if the company, filters things through recruiters, I'm fine with that too. But I mean, I would be cautious about giving my information to just some random recruiter and saying,
Some
"Hey,
rando.
I'm looking for a job. Find me something good." I'm like, they don't know me. How are they going to represent me and figure out what I want? So
Yeah.
yeah, totally agree on that. All
Yeah,
right,
but no,
so
a good recruiter, to sum that up, I'm going to sum that up again.
okay, the
a good
summary.
a good recruiter can go a long way in helping you gain information about job descriptions,
Yeah,
companies, hiring practices, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can find one, don't don't let those crazy recruiter emails from LinkedIn scare you away from the idea completely. Just find somebody that comes um, with a seal of approval from some other people that you trust, and generally that's when I've done that, that's worked out really, really well for me.
yeah. I
So
found the LinkedIn recruiter spam interesting, especially now, as I've grown the circle of people that I interact with and such in the community. Uh, like I'll post some joke or something. I'll post some line that I found humorous in one of their posts, and then someone would be like, "Oh, did you get an email from so and so?" Just like I just did with the South Florida one, and you're like, "Was this?"
yeah, I think I got the same one.
And it's humorous because it's like it's obvious that these people are literally just searching for a single keyword and being like, just spam everybody that comes up in this and just ask them and figure out and see what happens. The shotgun approach to recruiting. So I mean that is scary, but that's not how everybody works in that industry. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. Shock and
So
awe. Dude.
Yeah, I wanted to also touch on. You mentioned something earlier about the unicorn job description where it's got everything listed and it's scary. And having been on the side where you're trying to write one of those job descriptions, I
Uh-huh.
used to be rather ruthless in my critique of how they're written, and I'm like, why does it have all this stuff in there? And like, why does it matter which specific framework or whatever? Like, all these things, and
Right.
we say this is all dumb. And but then trying to write one and trying to filter people based on a certain set of requirements, like kind of the technical challenges that the position would have to face. So you're trying to write a description that says, here's experience that would help you solve these problems.
Right.
It's a very, very challenging thing to do. So, my advice is if you come across a job description, your first reaction is, oh, they obviously want a super guru rock star ninja.
Right.
Uh, it may just be that they were having a hard time articulating in a way that could get through to, their department or whatever. Like
Right.
it's difficult to write those things in a way that is not leading and not too generic. So, you know,
Hmm.
cut the job description a little slack and try to read between the lines as to what they're doing. And
What
then
they're Okay, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's kind of there's a line.
Yeah,
There's a line where if the job description kind of isn't exactly what you're looking for, um, it's like trying to find a spouse, right? There's gonna be some, no one's perfect. Let's say that, right? They all do annoying things. It's just part of being a human,
except my wife.
except
I
your
think
wife.
I think
That's
she's listening right now, so
Yeah. Uh,
I'm obligated to say you're wrong, Matt.
well, I'm sure that's true. Um, but no, I mean, in all seriousness, I've never met your wife. I'm sure she puts up with you, so she's got to be pretty amazing. Um, but it's like, yeah, there's some things that, like, if it's framework specific or whatever, it's good to read between the lines. Um, but like if you're reading it and it's talking about like crushing it with your bro hams and stuff, like, I mean,
Yeah,
unless that's your goal, is to like crush it with your bro hams, um, there's not a whole lot of reading between the lines. Like
yeah,
in some of those rare cases, they can give you kind of an insight to what the company's like,
sure.
um, based on some of the words. The good ones don't, and I think that's good actually.
Good ones
But some
don't
of
give any insight into the company. Is that what you're saying?
into the culture side of the company.
Okay.
I mean, when they talk about like, hey, we have a pool table and a ping pong table and beer bong, or whatever. I don't know what people do. I work at home.
We play beer
Um,
pong all the time. Yeah.
no, I
It's
said a
just
beer.
it's a,
I said a beer bong.
I know, but I'm saying like that can be part of your job
Yeah,
description. You
yeah.
must be willing to participate in beer pong tournament.
Must be an alcoholic. Uh, um, but yeah, I mean, so there's keywords, I'm not judging if you're looking to crush it, and that appeals to you. Then by all means, crush
Go
away,
crush it.
go crush it, bro. Um, but just be aware that some of those very flowery or really trying to sound hip job descriptions, like you can read those and react to them as you normally would, because like anybody that says crush it that doesn't work at like an aluminum can crushing factory, like that's not my scene. So if I saw crushing it in a job description, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me.
You crush it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I crush on a dating basis. Like that type of I don't know, like language doesn't really bother me that much, but I totally understand. Like there is a culture associated with that concept. So that I
Yeah.
agree is not really my thing. Like I don't want to. I would definitely not want to be in a position where people were, subjected to things that they, you know, don't want to hear and do all the time. Like
Or do it work.
yeah, like maybe people don't want to drink beer, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe I do. So it doesn't really,
Right.
but I don't think that they should be forced to do anything like that. So yeah, that is definitely
Well,
something to
you
look
know,
for.
yeah. All I'm saying is just be aware that when you're looking at like specific technologies, I think that reading between the lines can, um, I don't want to say lower your standards, but maybe lower your expectations a little bit. Like that you're going to find that perfect gig that's going to be exactly everything that you do, and say, okay, you know what, they use um, Zen Framework 2. Okay, I can deal with that. Or they use whatever they use, and go, okay, it's modern. It's not uh, post nuke or code igniter or something. It's a modern framework, and you can glean information like that, even if it's not your framework of choice,
Yeah,
which is probably Laravel. Um, you can.
not touching that.
Come on, Jeff. Um, you can still glean a lot of good information that's like, from that. Maybe you use PHP unit for mocking stuff, and they're like, "Oh, we use mockery." Like, don't worry about that so much. But culture things that leak through into a job description that try to make the job sound super sexy. Like, I always look at it like, if you're trying that hard in your job description to make it sound like so much fun, like, it's probably not.
Yeah, yeah, I can kind of agree and disagree with that a little bit. In two different fronts. Like I feel
Okay.
like to me anyway, the tech side is interesting and vaguely important or sort of important to me. Like
Right.
I don't want to work somewhere terrible in terms of tech stack and everything. But what's more
Good
important to me
idea.
is the company and the culture. Like who am I going to be working with? So like what I would look for is, does a culture of caring about quality, does a culture of, you know,
Hmm.
sharing and communication and stuff like that, does that come through in the job description? So, I mean, what you're saying makes sense, and it tracks to be like, if you see something that you're opposed to or something that rubs you the wrong way, like you see this extreme, programming culture coming through, and you don't want to be involved in that, which you shouldn't, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to be involved in that, then yeah, definitely pass on it. But if nothing comes through, like if the job post is purely around tech, like if that's all you see coming through,
Yeah.
then to me that would be a huge red flag because that would be like these people are sort of treating it like tech is a black box of robots that just all they care about is the tech side. So they don't care about the culture. They don't care what it's like. All they want to do is come into work and hammer down some code and crush it and then go
Crush,
home.
crush it, bro.
Yeah. So like to me at this point in my career anyway, I'm more interested in the cultural side and like how that develops than I am
Uh-huh.
in knowing the very specifics of the tech stack because it's not that difficult to pick up for me. Like I mean, it doesn't seem like your examples. If I am used to using PHP units mock object framework, and they're using Mockery, that's not a huge change for me.
Right.
It's not a big deal. So I don't worry about that stuff. I worry about can I work in this culture? Like that's what's going to attract me to your company, not
Right.
so
Not
I
a
guess
framework or a tool or.
yeah. So what I'm saying is like the projects and the people are what's going to attract people to your company, uh, not the how many lines of code you have. That's not important,
Right. Right.
in my
Yeah. I
opinion.
mean, I think in that PHP unit mocking framework example and mockery, in that example we just used, like, instead of they're using mockery or they're not using mockery or whatever, like, a way to look at that is, they're actually writing tests, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've gone into situations where like, hey, we write tests, and then you go there and you're like, what the hell is this? Right? The tests aren't great, but as somebody that's fought for tests in the past, um, getting someone to be like, yeah, that's a good idea, is like 95% of the battle. If you go there
Yeah.
and there's bad tests, you can fix those, and there's no expectation that you're wasting time. Like your tests suck, you can fix them. You can even make them like a what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, training.
Professional development.
For, yeah, but I mean, like for new people, you'd be like, hey, you know what? We're gonna write tests.
Oh, like part of the onboarding process. Like,
Onboarding. That's where I almost said re-education. No, onboarding.
I think I'm gonna try to change ours from onboarding to re-education. I like that.
Right? So I mean, so you go, okay, there's tests, and maybe they're not great, maybe they are, and if they're great, then you high five yourself because that's a good thing. But instead of looking at kind of what's what, look at kind of, hey, what does this piece of information tell me about the company? If it's a framework, you might just go, well, they're an idiot because they're not using my favorite framework. But with other things, you can glean a lot of information about what their practice is and kind of what their technology, I call it technology culture,
Yeah.
is like. And that's
I
good,
like
and that's
to,
information you can
I like
use.
to get a lot of that out during interviews. Like,
Yeah.
so I suppose we can transition to that topic now.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, okay, first I want to start here. What is the absolute worst interview experience you've ever had, as someone being an interviewee?
Um, whew, gosh, I've had so many interviews.
Okay, I'm gonna start. So
You go
think
first. I'm
about
gonna I'm gonna ponder this here.
it. Okay, so one of the worst ones I ever had. I responded to this job ad, and I was like, "Oh, this looks like a cool job." This was years ago at a company that I won't talk about, but I responded to this job ad, and I was like, "This seems like cool. It seems like a cool place to work." And they're like, "All right." So I called in. The person who answered was like, "Oh yeah, that's great. We're holding interviews on this date." And I was like, "Okay, that's kind of weird, but sure." So I show up at this place, and there's like 15 other people there, and we're all just sitting in this room. And this lady comes out, and she's like, "I'm the office manager, yada yada, and you mean with our, I forget, product or our engineering manager or whatever she was called at the time, and here's your exam," and literally passed out this like 30 question paper, like stapled together. Like I was expecting a Scantron as well, but it was like this. It was like
Cuts us down, Jeffrey.
it was a test. Yeah, I was like, oh, did I walk into a class? And so I'm going through it, and it's like this was for basic like PHP web app job, and I was like, okay. So I go through, and this thing is asking like electrical engineering questions, like like computer hardware stuff, and I'm just like, what? And then at the end there's this thing that says write a program that will, one of those typical puzzles. I forget what it was, but it was like one of those, you've got 1,000 integers, find the one that's duplicated or whatever, like whatever, one of those stupid
Yeah.
brain teaser problems. And I'm like, I would never do this in real life, and it was like write a program that will do it. And then it had like 4 blank sheets of paper after that, and I was like, am I supposed to write this program? So I gave it my best shot or whatever, and so then I'm expecting to then go talk to somebody. They collect all the papers, after a time or whatever, and they're like, okay, we'll get in touch with you if you pass, essentially. And I was like, okay. And a week later, they call me back, and they're like, thank you for applying or whatever. We'd like to schedule an interview with you. And I was like, no, I think I'll pass on this. This is probably the weirdest.
So
I
you
don't want to
passed
work
though.
there. Yeah, I guess, or maybe I was just not the worst one. I don't know. Like I don't know how that all worked out, but considering
That's
it was a week later, I'm hoping that, or I'm thinking that probably I was like at least passed, but probably some other people declined ahead of me. I guess I don't know, but
yeah, you'd hope.
it was just weird. I was like, I don't get this as a technique. So if you ever walk in someplace and they give you an exam, my advice is just walk out. So yeah,
All right, so I have two.
okay.
I'll keep them short. One of them was mostly weird because of the format and the timing of it. The other one was weird because it was kind of the same thing. So I had interviewed at this place, um, and had a couple conversations with people. You get the kind of first level guy, and then you get on down or whatever. And so I got into the final or second to last step, which was some sort of programming challenge, um, where
That's
I
fun.
had I had to write FizzBuzz, right? Not horribly uncommon for the time that this happened, but I had to do it. Uh, I'm not sure if you're familiar with PHP Golf.
No.
So the idea behind PHP Golf is to try to write these algorithms or programs or whatever in the fewest number of bytes possible.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And so you have a one-liner with a short open tag and uh, you know. Uh, after that, I had to do some web scraping as part of this test.
Okay.
With the instructions that I couldn't actually use like a web scraping library. I had to do it all with preg match, and I had to build this graph, and so having not really a the PHP golf thing, I was just like, why does it matter if I can write FizzBuzz in like 40 bytes? It doesn't matter.
Because hard drives are expensive. That's
Yeah,
why.
well, that's true. At the time, they were. They were like $30. Um, but the scraping thing, I had never really done. I mean, I had done some things like that before, but I was using all this stuff that I had never done before, and so it ended up taking me like a significant amount of time to get it done and get it done right, and actually like complete the assignment. And I actually did it, which makes me an idiot. So that was that one. It was just the programming tests I'm not a huge fan of. Like, if you want to give a programming test to somebody coming out of college, I can at least understand that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think
To a
you
degree,
have
yeah.
to. Yeah, I don't think you have to. Um, but I understand that more. But somebody that's been in the industry for 10 years, um, giving them fizz buzz, I mean, whatever. The second one was funny because I did the interview on Skype, which wasn't all that uncommon to do. But the team that I was interviewing with was located in like Johannesburg, South Africa, and so my interview was at like 6:15 a.m. Central Standard Time. Video call on Skype. My hair was all messed up. It was a nightmare.
Should have brought
Uh,
your hat.
yeah, I didn't have my sunglasses on either. It was too early to even be bright. And I ended up writing. I remember they had me write some code in the Skype instant message window.
With all of its syntax highlighting keywords.
Right, right. And I I was doing a for loop on an array, and it was 6:15 in the morning, and I was typing it in Skype, and I made the mistake of putting the count in the for in the for loop definition there, and they dinged me pretty bad for that Skype coding gaffe.
Well, I mean, maybe Skype was their source control solution, and they really it's like a cloud IDE before cloud IDEs were a thing, right?
Make sure that you have save your history on, or else
Yeah.
all your code will be lost.
That's how we keep our revisions, is inside Skype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were kind of my two. The funny thing with the 615, other than that, like you put count in the for loop in Skype at 6:15 in the morning. It was actually a pleasant interview. I enjoyed talking to them, and they're one of the few companies that gave me feedback when they ultimately didn't offer me a job. They told me what I needed to work on, in order to kind of fill that position. Yeah, they you need to work on your IDEs a little bit.
It's terrible.
But they're one of the few companies that have ever responded, because I always ask.
Yeah.
If I don't get a job,
it doesn't hurt. Yeah.
They're never going to tell you, except for this time.
Yeah. A lot of times it's going to be like, we just, didn't.
We found someone we liked more.
Yeah, we found somebody who was able to do better, whatever. Yeah. So, interestingly, I've been recently in this process from the other side of the table. So I've been the interviewer as opposed to the interviewee.
Yes.
And it's kind of an interesting challenge. Like, I wanted to approach it from the standpoint of, what would I like to see in an interview process, and then what's going to tell me the most about, the candidates in terms of their abilities to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give rough examples. I'm not gonna give exactly what went on, but
I was waiting for a dog joke. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, rough. So an example, we were hiring for a position where someone would be writing a lot of APIs, and then also mentoring and training, junior developers. So as a senior level position, they'd be doing a lot of work with, product managers and stuff like that. So we wanted to develop a process that would kind of give us insight into their abilities in that arena. So what we ended up going with was, typical phone screen concept, and then if that went well, like if they were able to communicate and such, then an example homework assignment, not anything like programming something really cool, but it's a code sample that's a pull request, and all you had to do was review it. So it's kind of an open-ended concept where there isn't really a right or wrong answer per se.
Right.
But the point was to test to kind of see what that person might look for in terms of like code quality, and whether they see security problems or whatever we were looking for that position. And we kind of did this also for our ops side before, where we had an example repo of a chef provisioning system, and there was something wrong with it, and so the test was just literally make this work, and so that's part of what they'd be doing.
Getting free work out of them.
No, I mean, no, it was a fake thing we made up. So
fix this for us, please.
Yeah, it just had a fake problem. But, the funny thing that we learned from that was we have it up as a repository in GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
Well, someone forked it and then sent us a pull request with the answer, and we were like, well, that's not ideal, because now the answer is out there. But so we kind of learned from that. The pull request thing, I think works well, because it's it's an example of a real world thing. And then during the interview process, we, instead of having a code challenge or a please draw on the whiteboard, some code.
I did that.
You work with another engineer that you would work with in the position, and work through an example that's very similar to a project that we have actually worked on,
Hmm.
kind of dumbed down so it will fit into a 30-minute window or whatever. But
Right.
uh, it's for so if you were wanting to be a someone who works on the APIs, then it would be hey, we need to solve this particular problem. Here's the business requirements. We need to build an API that supports this particular story or this particular set of criteria or whatever, and then go through the process of designing it and or implementing it depending on what you're doing, depending
Hmm.
on what position you're applying for. So that actually worked light years better than typical interview processes where you're asking some completely unrelated code example, like write me an algorithm for sorting things, and it's like, well, I'm developing web apps, not writing low-level sorting algorithms.
Right.
Why is it incredibly important that I be able to solve this like
Yeah.
without libraries? I don't understand. So that's what we did, and I think so that's what I would look for in the interview process is
Hmm.
what are these people giving me to do, or like what are they trying to get out of me,
Right.
and that will tell you a lot about how much how much work they've put into the process to cater it towards the position. Will tell you a lot about the company in general, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I did some interviewing myself.
Okay,
Could you imagine interviewing with me?
I
It
do it
was,
all the time.
it was yeah, it's true. Well, I'm not giving you a job or money though.
That's fine.
You do it for the sheer love because you love
Yeah,
me.
it's true.
Um, yeah, so I interviewed people before, and when I'm on a podcast or a hangout or some other kind of jovial uh, endeavor, I tend to be jovial. When I interview, for some reason, I turn into a huge dick, which is probably why I don't interview people anymore.
Yeah, that could be it.
But like, because like they threw like I've been thrown into it. Like it was like, hey, you're gonna interview this guy, and I'm like, okay. Like here's his resume, which is resumes are just I don't know. Like my experience with it was this is why I hate the idea of resumes. Like I'd rather just talk to someone and be like, tell me what you know, and if you tell me something that I like, at some point in this process, we're gonna figure out whether or not you actually know that or not.
Yeah,
Like resumes are all like manipulated strings in order to sortify the
sort of.
whatever they're all worded like main responsibility oversaw operation of web servers. Like you sat in a room and watched web servers,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, like, so I would read all these resumes and they all sounded good. Been working with PHP for 5 years and I've done all this stuff. And when I would get them on the phone, I'd be like, oh, okay, like, I mean, I'm still, I'm nice. I'm not like like, yelling at, like, tell me what you know. But, like, so tell me about your experience with PHP. And they're like, I've done WordPress installs, for this place. And, you know, uh, kind of customizing it. I'm like, oh, so you build your own themes and stuff. Because that's something. I mean, it's something that you can grab onto. They're like, no, no, dog. I download them because like, why reinvent the wheel? And so I have all these like, they're like, yeah, like I installed PHP once, and I got so like tired of interviewing those people that I quit interviewing people.
Yeah, that sounds pretty rough.
Like I I don't know. Interviewing people blows.
It does sometimes. I think it depends on, having a process, like having it nailed down of how you're going to get the information that you want to. Like, I don't know.
I
So
don't know. I use GitHub, right? So here's the thing, and I know that this doesn't sit well because that's some sort of, I don't know. It cuts out people that don't have time to put things on GitHub, and I feel truly sorry about that. But I would always ask if they had done open source contributions, if they had a GitHub profile, something that I could actually see their code, like somewhere that's not like, hey, write FizzBuzz on the dry erase board. Like actual code that before they knew they were interviewing with me, they thought was good enough or
yeah,
a good representation of themselves to be on their GitHub profile.
yeah.
That makes me an awful man, I'm sure, but
I've I've always I've always wanted to. I just never have had the time to do this, but I've always wanted to go look at jobs out there that say you must have a or send us your GitHub profile. That's what we're interested in,
yeah.
and then go look at the company's GitHub profile
Hmm.
and see if the company is like very invested in open source and like what their open source profile is like.
Yeah.
It feels like to me if a company whose open source profile consists of maybe one tool that they forked or something and have contributed back one patch, and they demand that I, as a potential developer at a company, have an extensive or at least something useful enough that they could consider it a portfolio to send them.
Hmm.
To me, that kind of rubs me the wrong way because it's like
Why?
you're not telling me that I need to invest my personal time in open source contributions, but as a company, you don't do the same thing. That's kind of to me, it's kind of shady. So, I mean, I personally, I don't like to use that as a measurement because I mean, there's tons of circumstances that could prevent someone from having
Right.
stuff up or
Well, I already said I'm a terrible person.
like, for example, suppose you spent, weeks of your life, months maybe, writing a PHP framework, and then you read Phil Sturgeon's post about how we don't need any more frameworks, and so you deleted it off of GitHub. Now you're screwed because you haven't like Phil told you can't do that, and he is the PSR guy, so you cannot do that.
Oh, we love Phil.
Because he's just so entertaining. But
He is
uh,
entertaining.
no,
I
I mean,
love, I love Phil. I won't speak for you, but
I'm
I
just
like Phil a lot.
I like Phil too. I'm just messing with him. But yeah, but I mean that's kind of my thing. Like maybe you invested your time in the wrong thing, or maybe you pushed really hard to get open source at your company. Like you put all of your energy into
Right.
getting your company stuff, and then you've been pushing to get it open sourced, but the legal department just keeps shutting you down or whatever. So you don't have anything up, and it's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, it's not like it's the end all be all. Like, if you don't have a GitHub profile, I'm not going to hire you. It's more just like,
well, you're not going to hire me anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
I'm not going to hire you, yeah, ever. No, it's not so much like it's a deal breaker. Like
Yeah.
it's a requirement for you to get this job that you have to have a GitHub profile with.
Well, yeah, but I've seen that though.
Oh, I'm sure that's a thing. I would always like it. It was always kind of a nice to have for me because it gave me as an interviewer information that I wouldn't have otherwise. And a lot of times I would look up these people and I'd get their resume a week before they came in, and I'd look at um, their GitHub profiles before that, and I already have an idea. But I always like the idea of being able to say, hey, you wrote this. Let's talk about this because right, because existing code, right, is one thing, and if someone can code, that's great. And if they can fit in with your team, then that's even better. And then you probably have a pretty good candidate. But if you can get a little bit of insight into their thought process, like what were you thinking when you wrote this? Like, what were you eating when you wrote this?
Yeah, thought process and also like communication ability and like how they interact with other people.
Right.
Depending on where they contributed, it's pretty easy to figure out like is this the type of person that will get a patch done, push it out if someone doesn't like it, go home and pout, or like is this code maintainer someone who's going to be like, hey, I received your pull request, I like the idea, I'm going to implement it my own way and then incorporate it. Like it just that type of stuff tells you about the candidate, and it could be good or bad, but that would be something that I'd be interested in more than do they have 15 commits in the past.
Yeah, no,
days.
I mean it was always, it's for me anyway, it was always more about let's look at something that you have that wasn't me trying to come up with some goofy ass exercise.
Yeah.
To prove that like PHP syntax.
Yeah. Because let me tell you, coming up with goofy ass exercises is difficult work.
It's so hard. I did it.
It is. I was trying to write that stupid pull request concept, and I'm like, I want to write something that you can understand in a single pull request, and has some things that you should be saying. If a junior wrote it and you're reviewing their code, you're like, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea, but isn't so blatantly obvious that it's a bad idea. Like it's difficult to write that. Yeah, it's difficult to write that kind of thing. So. Yeah, if you can get away with looking at somebody's past contributions, then yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Well, so I look at it like this, and you can take this whether you're someone that's interviewing or someone that's being interviewed. I look at it like this: as someone that's interviewing for a position, I'm going to do myself the most good by getting as much information about the company as I can.
Yeah.
Before I go interview. But the same goes for the company. And there's some really like super shady things that people do, like create fake Facebook accounts and pictures and stuff.
That's kind of
that crosses the line a little bit for me. But the company, I mean, you have to expect, they're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. See what kind of skills people have endorsed you for, which, by the way, Jeff, you have some new ones.
Oh, good.
They're going to look at your GitHub profile. They're going to look at anything that's public, your Twitter account. So if you're tweeting, like, horribly, like, racist, sexist, awful, terrible things, like, just
you should stop that.
No, I'm not saying you should stop that. If that's what you want to do it. Just be aware
you should totally stop doing that as a human being.
Yeah. I mean, it's your Twitter account. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. But just be aware that employers are going to look at that if you're not using Twitter protection, so to speak. Having a protected account. No, bad joke? Okay. Sorry.
Where's the binder?
They're going to look at it, and they're going to make judgments about you.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because I kind of, I flip back and forth on whether, how much of that should be a thing. Like, I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and, a lot of them I knew, through college and such, and, we were good friends, and we'd go out places, and so, there'd be pictures of us drinking when we were of legal age, of course, and stuff like that. And then they became teachers, and they had to delete a bunch of pictures, and like they changed their name on Facebook to something else, or
Peachy McTeacher.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's weird because to me it's like being in this industry, I would want someone to go look at my Twitter profile and be like, what is this? What does he tweet about?
What is he about? Yeah.
And if I go to a candidate's Twitter account and it's filled with their untapped, like it's all untapped auto tweets or whatever, it doesn't bother me. Like I don't care.
Right. They like beer.
If it was filled with tech stuff, that's cool. If it's filled with personal stuff, that's cool too. Like I just won't read it. Like it's not. but if it is tech related, then I'll read it and just kind of get an idea of, how what they're interested in or what they
Yeah,
think is
yeah.
retreat worthy or whatever.
You kind of take these pieces and build a better view of who that person
Yeah,
is,
you're building a
not
profile of
just
them. Yeah.
in tech, but as a person.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
think.
no, I mean,
Yeah, but I struggled with that on whether like what was appropriate in there because part of it feels like you know I don't want to say stalking, but it's like if
well, you
someone
are. I
applies
mean,
and they don't put a link to their Twitter account, but I'm able to find it,
yeah.
is it appropriate or is it not? Like I don't know.
I would only interview people with really unique names, so I knew I could find them easily on Twitter.
Yeah, but like
No, I'm just kidding.
so what if rejected name is John Smith, or Smith.
Declined.
Name is Jake Smith. There's two of them. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's interesting because like for me, if I were interviewing somewhere, I would want someone to look at my LinkedIn profile and see what idiotic things all of my friends have endorsed me for. I would want them to look at my Twitter profile and see what I tweet about. I'd want them to listen to this podcast and get my numbers up. Hear stuff that I'm contributing or whatnot. Like I want them to know the stuff about me, but I can see some people not wanting that.
yeah. I endorsed you for XML, by the way.
Okay, that's cool. I do love XML.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I like how we would go about it, right? Like it sounds like you and I are on the same page. Like now, I heard at one of the jobs that I've been at that the boss looked at my uh, Twitter account.
And face palmed.
Well, yeah, looking at my Twitter account is something that like no one should ever do, like ever. Um, but they enjoyed kind of my self-deprecating sense of humor. I've been known on occasion to be self-deprecating,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you're aware of.
No, I've never heard it before.
Yeah, it was in it was in a joined-in feedback on one of my talks,
I remember that.
and they enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That I didn't take myself super seriously. So it's not like I'm not trying to instill fear in people to say like don't ever post anything on social media that might rub someone the wrong way because then you would never post anything.
Yeah.
Like you could post it's a nice day and it could be like really bad weather where they're at and be like, what?
Yeah.
What an animal! We're not hiring this person. What I would say in that regard, because we're on the same page. I like to know more than just the tech about people. I like to know what they're into and try to get as much information about them as a person, as someone that has interests and hobbies and things like that beforehand.
Yep.
But there are companies that don't. Right. There are things that exist, so you need to make sure if you're applying at one of those companies, and generally, in my experience, if your Twitter account comes up during the interview, that's not a crazy positive thing.
I don't
Like
know.
I said, in my experience.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I think it depends on where you're what type of company you're trying to work for. Obviously, larger companies are going to have more of a problem with you having your own you know,
Voice.
voice and quirky personality or whatever. Like it's just
Right.
it. I mean, that's just the way of things. But
The cogs have to be the same shape.
yeah, generally, or at least somewhere in the same vicinity. So yeah, it just depends on what kind of job you're looking for, and to me, like that's kind of where it boils down to. Is if I were looking, I would be looking at a place that's culturally similar to how I generally behave. So like I would want some place that
Yeah.
values people, and I would want some place that values mentorship and quality of code, and like all these things are very important to me. So I would try to in the interviewing process, get as much of that out of the person interviewing me as possible.
Yeah.
So that brings me to this point.
Okay.
If you're interviewing, and Matt, you already touched on this, but
Okay.
do some research on the company.
Yeah.
Like do research on people who work there. Go read their Twitter accounts or whatever. Like figure out what their culture is like, or figure out how the people are. And then when you're given the opportunity, and if you're not, then figure out a way to work this in. But ask questions about things that are important to you. So
Yeah.
like, when the interviewer turns around and says, "Okay, I've asked you a few questions. Is there anything you would like to know?" Take that opportunity. If process is important to you, ask questions about the process. Like you're never going to get better answers to, what is it like being an engineer here, than when you're talking to an engineer who
Right.
works there.
Right.
So, don't
I found
ask.
a lot of times they're pretty real with you too. Like
Yeah,
you
and that's
don't get the HR speak. You get like, hey, we've got a couple of problems. It's not perfect. There's some things that we're trying to do better.
yeah, and that's why I say, like, you as someone who's being interviewed, you also have to develop the questions, like the skills to ask questions
Yeah, absolutely.
that get you to the answers that you want. So, like,
Absolutely.
your job as someone who's interviewing is, as cliche as it may sound, you're trying to figure out if the company is a good fit for you as much as the company's
Right.
trying to figure out if you're a good fit for them.
Right.
So, don't ever skimp on. And this was something that someone told me. This guy named Jeremy Briggs, I think. He's
Okay.
a tech recruiter at Microsoft. And back when I was in college, I talked to him a lot. Like I was
Yep.
trying to get an internship there or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, I love interviewing." He's like, "Sometimes," he goes, "I go interview just for the fun of it." He's like, "I'm not really interested in the job, but I go because I really like it." And I thought he was nuts,
Yeah. It
but
sounds like it.
I can see that that's actually a valuable skill as someone who is interviewing, to go on interviews, because that helps you, with the thinking on your toes and like being able to like being
Yeah,
able to
getting
ask the
comfortable with the
questions.
process.
Yeah, and so like one of the pieces of advice that he gave me was never ever waste an opportunity to ask a question. He goes, you know, don't ever ask questions about things that you can read on their about page.
Yeah.
And to me that really, struck me as, at first I was like, well, that's weird. Like, what if I really want to know, hey, how many people do you have working in your department? I can
Mhm.
figure that out by looking at your about page. Probably,
Maybe.
maybe, perhaps. Depends on the size of the company.
Right.
But
But that's not a question that's giving you a whole lot of.
yeah, and like the size of your team, like maybe instead of asking, how many people on your team, maybe ask questions like, when was the last time your manager asked you how you were doing? Or, things that are important to you.
Right.
Like ask something like, if if you're really interested in a continuous deployment, like, what's your deployment process like? Like, just figure out a way to ask a question that's going to get you to the answers that you want. Don't squander the opportunity to ask a question with something innocuous like, you know, I don't know, like just trying to figure out a really good example of a really bad question, but use it to figure out something that is extremely important to you in your decision making process.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I didn't share this yet, so I think I will now. Because when you first said that he interviewed because he liked interviewing, I can't necessarily share that perspective.
Yeah, not
Um,
many people can.
right. But as you well know, and most of the people in IRC know, I went through a period of time where I interviewed like 25 times in 10 months or something like that. Not because I wanted to. Um, well, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But there is definitely some credence to that ability to kind of be comfortable interviewing, being in front of someone talking about yourself. A lot of people, including myself, have a hard time talking about themselves, selling themselves. Gosh, I gotta quit saying that. Uh,
Is that why you joined to be a co-host on a podcast?
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like people have a difficult time with that. Talking
Yeah.
about themselves, explaining their skill set, explaining why they would be a good fit for a position, and it's like anything else, like doing it repeatedly and kind of getting yourself in that mode where you're like, okay, I've done this enough now where when someone asks me a question about why I would be a good fit, I've given good answers, I've given bad answers, I've given, you know, answers that are somewhere in the middle of those, and I've learned a lot about myself through through interviewing, just in how I describe myself and
Yeah.
how to talk about myself positively, because my natural inclination is like because of my self-deprecating nature is to be like, well, why would you be a good fit for this job? My answer and my sense of humor and all that would say, well, I'm probably not.
So why would you be a
So
good fit for this job? Well, now that you mentioned it, I'm not really. You're
I'm
right.
not
I'm
really,
sorry.
but you should take
You're
a
right.
chance on
I'm
me.
terrible. Sorry. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, I'll,
sort
I'll
myself
see
out.
myself out. Yeah.
You valet parking?
Right. So, pro tip: don't say that
Oh. Pro tip.
in an interview. Don't. Um, but no, but it's really good practice because I think my experience has been when you're doing anything, whether it's interviewing, whether it's releasing code, there's that moment of awkwardness. There's that like moment of kind of putting yourself out there
Yeah.
and you're saying, hey, this is my code or this is me talking about myself. And the more that you do that, the more that you kind of become comfortable with that,
Yeah.
the easier it gets and the better you're going to kind of represent yourself. It's just like anything. I mean, if you want to get better at writing code, um, write code. If you want to get better at interviewing, you got to interview.
Yeah.
If you want to get better at hosting a podcast, there's no hope.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that kind of translates also into, or at least for me, like, speaking. Like
yes,
that's another one where it's like, you know,
speaker's going to speak.
Yeah, if you want to speak, the only way to do that is to actually speak. Like I can rehearse 100,000 times and it's fine, and then get up there in front of people and I'm like, oh crap. So as you're as you're going into the interview, like just keep in mind, like I think everyone who's on the other side of the table recognizes that being in an interview is stressful, and being on that side of the table sucks a lot for most people, unless you're if you're really into that thing. But uh,
Right.
so just do the best that you can, right? Like it's a stressful situation, but
Hmm.
everyone is aware of that. So don't like get too caught up in your own head while you're in there, like shouldn't have said that, or I could have done better, or they wrote down 5 things, maybe it's bad. Like maybe they're all
Right.
good things. You never know, So just
Crushed it. Maybe they wrote
crush it.
crushed it.
Maybe they did. Maybe that could be one of your questions.
Did I
At
crush
the
it?
end. Did I crush it, or did you write down that I crushed it? Because then I'm not going to do the job.
I'm curious if you wrote down anything about me crushing it. Just for my
And
own
that's a good question.
curiosity.
That's a good question because it kind of leads either way, right? Like you can, if they say no, you can be like, well, why not? What could I have done to crush this?
What could I have done
And,
to crush this more?
and if they say that you did, say, well, great. When do I start? So I
When do
think
I start?
that's a good question to ask. I'm going to add that to my list. Thanks, Matt.
On a scale of 1 to crush.
Yeah. Let's see. Any other?
That's wonderful. I'm going to use that.
Do you have any more interviewing pro tips, Matt?
Um, no, I mean, just just do it. There's a weird kind of level of confidence that you have to take in because um, it kind of goes back to that old adage that I'm going to kind of modify here to make it appropriate for this podcast. Um, let the company tell you that you're not a good fit. Don't tell the company that you're not a good fit. And I don't mean necessarily explicitly, but your body language, the way you answer questions, the way you carry yourself, the way you describe yourself, all kind of builds up an image of who you are professionally and whether or not you can be an asset to or a resource to the company that you're applying at. If they call you a resource, generally you want to turn around the other way.
Are all resources, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Just making sure.
but seriously, there's you kind of have to. It's almost like acting in a way, right? Because there's a level of kind of imposter syndrome that everybody deals with. There's a level of, maybe I'm not a good fit for this job. Maybe I don't know enough. Those doubts and those questions, I think, creep into everybody's mind. They certainly do mine. And how you kind of handle that and get past that and get over that, even if you don't believe a word of what you're saying. I mean, as long as you're not lying, don't lie in a job interview. That's bad. But sometimes, you find yourself in a spot where you have to really look hard and deep and figure out the things about yourself that they might like or that you might like about yourself. That sounds horribly depressing, doesn't it?
But at the same time, like, I think there is some value in being selective. Like,
Yeah.
I understand there will be times when, you really need a job or whatever, and so you're like, I really need to figure something out. So anything that's even vaguely in my ballpark, I'm gonna try.
Wheelhouse. Yeah.
And that's fine, and I get that.
Yeah.
But if you do have the luxury, be selective. Like, I would say it's better to err on the side of like being more conservative with who you talk with than it is to just kind of go out and I'm just going to shop around and figure out everything that every possible job that I might want, I'm going to apply for. Like, my advice is, because it is so stressful, don't make it a every time you're doing it a five company ordeal, right? Like, because that to me that would drive me crazy. But if that's your thing, go for it. But I would say be conservative in how you're doing this and how often you're doing it. Like, just I don't know.
The way life works out is when you kind of throw your resume against the wall and in kind of a mass radius or a large radius. It's going to stick to things that you probably wouldn't apply for if you really sat down and thought about it.
Yeah.
And the only thing more awkward for me, again, because I'm a people pleaser, is someone being like, "Hey, we really like you. We want to hire you," and then me being like, "Oh my gosh, I've made a terrible mistake."
Yeah.
Like, and having to turn down an offer or inform people that, hey, we're not going to go forward.
Yeah.
With this interview or whatever. I agree. I think being selective, finding jobs that, my goal is always to apply for things that if I were to get an offer, I would likely accept. Obviously, that has conditions, whether the money's right and whether or not I have to wear pants and things like that.
So if you got a decent offer, that's
If I were to get an offer that was in line with what I expected, I would take it, kind of a thing. So that's how I kind of try to do it. Like, if the money's right and the responsibilities are right, and I'm not, like on call like 47 hours a day, and things like that, like things that are important to me.
Yeah.
I want to apply for jobs that I know I'm going to take. I get an
Yeah, and
offer, I'm going to take it.
that's kind of what I meant by be selective. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we have to say this, I think, because it's hilarious. But it's been suggested in the IRC channel that
Uh-oh.
not being selective is what leads to working with Drupal. Um, uh,
Oh.
not that there's anything wrong with that, but
This is like a really like awful Seinfeld episode.
yeah, but yeah, and I think the point there is not anything about Drupal per se, but the point is
I think that's exactly what it is.
not being selective is going to land you in a time where my whole thing on I don't necessarily care about the tech stops at a certain point. Like there are certain times where I see certain tech and I don't want to deal with it. So not being selective, like not really getting to understand how things happen is how you end up in situations where you start the job and 2 weeks in you're ready to quit because you're like, wait, this isn't anything like what I was expecting.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
with Drupal now.
I heard of people that have gone through similar situations.
Yeah, and that's rough, but I think that is part of the reason that I'm so adamant about like doing some homework and like really trying to understand how you can ask the questions that you want to ask about the company.
Yeah.
See, like if you really value communication, and this is a company that the only communication with the outside world from anyone on the team is through PR, like through press releases, then
Oh, okay, right.
that's probably a signal that maybe this isn't the right fit for you, even if the tech is cool. Like they're doing all the stuff you want to do, but they're not communicating in a way that you think is that really jives with your style. Then did I just say jives? That really
You
meshes with your
did, yeah.
style.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Meshes. That's a much better word. Good
And
word there.
maybe don't apply there. Like even
Coagulates with your style.
coagulates. Yeah, I don't know, but like that's my point. Is
Yes.
you know
Your point is well taken.
okay.
Your phrasing isn't, but your point is.
Look, I said meshes. Just calm down. Just relax, Mr.
As long as,
Sunglasses.
as long as there's synergy.
Yeah, there has to be synergy and lots of crushing.
Crushing and synergy are two must-haves.
Yeah, and for me, a new requirement that I'm going to have is any place that I work is going to have to be open to me wearing sunglasses at all hours of the day.
I will say, well, you're just teasing me now, and that's not nice. But one of the things that since it's no secret that I worked here, I'm gonna company drop here. When I worked at Cinecor, I traveled out there quite a bit. I got to know Buffalo really well. One of the things that I was really looking for, and I don't know if I ever told anyone this. I think I want to say the only person that actually ever saw the video of this was Matt Turland. Maybe he just saw pictures. I don't know if he saw the video or not, but they had a lot of like company-sponsored events, like monthly.
Uh-huh.
And so when I was out there for my first week of work, right, which was obviously in the office, they had an event called Cinecor Idol, which was a karaoke competition at a brewery restaurant place close to the office. And so I found, and this isn't everyone's personality, so I'm certainly not recommending this for everyone, but I found myself up on, it wasn't really a stage, up in front of everyone with a microphone in my hand, singing Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys, all three parts by myself. And I found, for that kind of place and time, for me that was something that, because I can't sing to save my life. You heard me singing Fantastic Voyage earlier, and that probably made you not want to listen to it. But I found, like, even after I started, like, company events and foosball tables and things are just kind of like, yeah, that's great, but am I going to want to blow my brains out every day after work because it's terrible? I found myself like, hey, these company events are actually kind of nice. Like I endeared myself to a lot of coworkers by kind of being brave enough to get up in front and sing a song that's, I mean, frankly, it's an awesome song. So, um, but like I learned about kind of what I'm looking for after I had already been hired, and I mean, it's certainly, for me, it's not like a vital thing because I work from home. And generally, if you work from home, company events are like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But I try to use every interview, every time I look at a job description, every application, that I repeat the same information that I just told someone on, and every employment destination that I've been at as a way to really kind of look at what I want and reevaluate what I want. And I've been surprised at the number of times where I've gone into kind of the interview process thinking, hey, this is something that I want, only to find out, A, that company didn't have it, and B, that I was okay with that. And in some cases actually preferred that it was not the way that I originally thought I'd wanted.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I just said a lot of words there in a short amount of time.
Yeah, you did. But yeah, and that makes sense. And then, the last thing is, if you have special requirements of some sort, like, if the job is in, say, Seattle, and you're not in Seattle and you have no intentions of going there, make that clear up front, right? Like that's kind of an important thing, which that has happened to me, and it's kind of a funny story. But I met someone who at a conference, and I had actually interviewed or started an interview with them, having told the recruiter that their internal recruiter, I guess, that I wasn't interested in relocating, and so I had this interview scheduled, and we're going to go through some exercise or something. And at the very beginning, I was like, now, just to be clear, it's like I told this to the recruiter, and they said that it wouldn't be a problem, but
But it probably is.
I don't want to, or I don't have the interest right now in relocating. So, is that going to be a problem? And it was like, well, yeah, you have to be here. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out then.
It's not going to happen.
So like, ended it right there, because it's like there's no point in wasting my time, wasting the company's time in that. So if you have something that's like that, like if you are remote and the job description was vague on whether it allows it, or it said remote option or something, like just be upfront with whatever your requirements are. Like some people have an onboarding requirement, like you have to be out here for 6 weeks or whatever at the beginning. So just figure out what that is up front. Like that's my advice, because there's nothing worse than like going through multiple hours of interviews and back and forth and emails and whatever, and then getting to a point where you're like, I really want this job, and they're like, we really want you to work here, and then it's like, oh, but I'm not going to spend 3 months out there.
Right.
You have to. So you just be upfront with that type of stuff. And the stuff that's negotiable, like salary ranges and that type of stuff, I would say, in my experience, don't be too hard on that at the beginning. But you do want to make sure that you're in the ballpark, because again, you don't want to waste your time or theirs.
Right.
If you're, $80,000 difference.
Right.
Between
but I will say with salaries and things like that, like if the salary is not where you want it to be. And I totally agree with everything you say. I try to do that. Like,
well, you should agree with everything I say. So.
I do.
Thanks. That's the end of the podcast. See you.
All right. See ya. See you next time. If the salary is not exactly in the range that you want, you can always pry for more information about advancement, salary, adjustment policies, and things like that. So, maybe you're not starting in the range that you'd like to be, but maybe they give you a raise after 3 months or after 6 months or after a year or whatever, Um, and those types of things, can kind of offset some of that initial shock of, well, I want this and they can't give me this, so maybe this isn't a good fit. But yes, always, and I've gotten really good at this. I've been interviewed or approached um, by some people that are, really good jobs, and my situation is that I kind of have to be at home because my kids are here. And so the first thing I always respond to people when they offer me or when they show interest in having me work for their company is, I'm at home. Um, I'm staying at home. If we can work something out where I can work for you and stay at home, great. But if not, I'm sure you have other candidates that would be willing to relocate to whatever city you're in. And I don't want to waste your time. So, and more times than not, they come back and say, yeah, okay, well, I appreciate you being upfront with me about that. Right now, we're not taking on telecommuters or whatever, which I think is a slang. I prefer pantsless workers.
I think telecommuters have to work by fax, though.
Telephony. But no, it's always been, you kind of keep doors and windows and things open by being upfront. And I mean, granted, I've never had anyone come back to me that said that, oh, right now we're not accepting telecommuters or pantslessness. I've never had anyone come back to me and say, hey, you know what, you can work pantsless now. But by not wasting that person's time, you're communicating that you're respecting their time, you're respecting your own time, and that in this crazy world the way it is today, that actually goes a really long way.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I'm in the same boat. Like I don't think I've ever had someone call me back months later or years later and be like, hey, guess what? We can now accept remote employees, but you'd never know.
Like, you have to wear pants.
Yeah. Well, that should be a given, I think. But
what?
I mean, okay. Put it this way: I am going to figure out if I can endorse you for pantsless coding on LinkedIn right now. But
don't I have to add it?
I don't know. I need to figure out if I can force a.
Oh, if you can add skills for me.
If so, this opens a world of possibilities.
He's good at being a terrible programmer. Endorse.
Yeah, I don't know. So
that would be a bug. If I see pantslessness on my LinkedIn profile that I never check, I will submit a bug to LinkedIn.
Let's figure out how to do this. But yeah, I think what you're saying makes sense. Like, being upfront is much better. Not wasting people's time is much better. Not wasting your own time is even better. But
yes,
you never know. Like I've had recruiters from various places to contact me and be like, hey, we've got this. And I'm like, company sounds cool. I'm not really interested in doing that. I'm more interested in this. And they're like, well, we'll keep your information in this or whatever. And I'm like, fine, do whatever you want. But
I can't stop you.
I can't stop you from filing.
Delete it now.
Yeah. Never contact me again. But it certainly doesn't help to just be upfront with things, and that's I think that's the best advice for your career. Is just be upfront with things like that, with requirements that you have.
Yeah. Honesty is the best policy. You were taught that when you were like probably 6 or something.
And then you learned it later. And,
it still applies.
Yeah, maybe.
Respect yourself, respect the other people, and their time and your time, and
totally.
What is it? Third star from the right and straight on till morning.
Something to that effect, yeah.
Smooth sailing. That's Peter Pan.
Yeah, I know.
I
know Tinkerbell.
I just dropped some Pan knowledge on everyone.
Yeah. So, you got anything else that is worthwhile or that needs to be?
Well, first I want to say you're welcome. Second of all, no, I mean I think we covered it. It's actually been a pretty good. a pretty voluminous topic here.
A voluminous topic.
I think
Yeah,
we
I think so. I think it's cool. So
it's a good topic. You should listen to it.
Yeah, evaluate job descriptions. Find the culture things that come through.
Yep.
Find the tech things that are also important to you. Figure out your expectations. Make sure that they're in line with the company. Be upfront about that stuff.
Practice interviewing. Use every interview, whether you think it's likely that you'll get the job or not. Use every interview and interaction with people as a learning experience and as a way to kind of get comfortable with, describing yourself professionally.
For sure. And bonus points if at the end of your interview and they're like, and that's all, do you have anything else? Be like, yes, could we schedule a quick retro about this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
they'll hire you. They'll hire you right there.
Really do that.
And then after the retro, you have to obviously ask if you crushed it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's, I think that should be the highest priority of all the advice we've given you. So
if I ever have a company that I run or that I'm like in charge of hiring people and someone asks me for a retro, I'm going to kick them out. Like,
I don't understand your dislike of retros. I really don't. But
well, we do a retro after every show.
Yes, which works,
and those are good. And as you can tell from episode 1, the quality has improved vastly.
Yeah, so I don't know what your problem is. They obviously are valuable tools. So
okay, well, if I can do every retro with you on a Google Hangout talking about our podcast, then I would get into retros.
Okay, talk to your boss. Figure out how to make it happen.
Ben, let's make this happen.
All right. Anyway, I think that's it. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much to the people hanging out in the IRC channel.
IRC.
Yeah.
We didn't even take questions, did we?
Yeah. So actually, we did. I think I turned on the question and answer thing, but
we don't have time, or do we have time?
I think we have time. Let's see what we got here.
Take the time. There's a Q&A thing. Oh, rad! I never even knew that existed. This is pretty much my first hangout.
We're obviously newbies at this, so
yeah.
Do this. All right, so I'm just gonna tackle this first one that I see here. It says, should old code on GitHub be taken down, or is it a good reflection on how well the individual has progressed technically? So that's actually a good question. So
that's a very good question.
Yeah, from my perspective, don't take it down, right? Unless it's just embarrassingly dumb or something like that, or
you have variables with like vulgar or sexist names.
Yeah, if you've got something that you really don't want someone to see, obviously curate. So like this is the same thing that I would do with
censor yourself is what Jeff is saying.
No, I'm saying curate. I'm using a nice word for this. But if I used to have a portfolio section or whatever that was like, here's things that I worked on. And when I was first getting started, every little thing that I did went on there. And I was like, look at this. And it's like, what'd you do on this site? Well, I made a contact us page. And, over time, I learned to take that and kind of curate it and say, yeah, I did all these things, but who cares? What people are more interested in is, a list of projects and what I specifically did on them. So right now I've got kind of a long form resume and then a short form resume, and they basically have a project section which will sit there and it talks about notable things that I worked on which were technically challenging or just generally cool or that sort of thing. So
do you put things in that are super boring so that people know you're a team player? Yeah,
of course. I say, here's something that I got coffee for the lead developer on. No. But my point is, in the same way that you would curate your resume, like you wouldn't include every job that you ever had after you've had 5 or 6, you would just say, here's relevant stuff or here's interesting.
Last 3 or whatever, right?
Yeah, and then if you want the full history, it's available later. So let's do the same thing on GitHub. So if you've got like an old project that you're not maintaining anymore, nobody's using, and doesn't really show off your current skill set, I would say you don't need to keep it up, but there's no harm in having it. So,
Right.
Do you have to delete it? No, but if you feel like it's a distraction, like if it's
Yeah. If it's taking away, if it's not representing yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually kind of ironic or funny or whatever. Nick Escobedo asked that question, and I actually interviewed Nick when I was in Chicago, and worked with him for 2 weeks. And literally, he got hired like the day after I gave my 2 weeks notice. So I didn't get to work. I didn't get to work with him that much, but yeah. So he can tell you what kind of interviewer I am. No, I think, but I think Jeff's right. I think, if it's if it's embarrassing, or if it's if you have something up there that's like, hey, I'm learning PHP, and it's hello, I don't mean literally hello world, but something very, very basic, and someone that's looking at it is going to be like, yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, if you're putting stuff on GitHub that's demonstrating who you are and what you've done and kind of how far you've come along, I think that can be really valuable.
Comment it, right? Like, put a comment in the README. Just says, hey, this is a project that I worked on a long time ago. Whatever. Here's some cool things about it, or whatever. Just like make it easy for people
or what you were trying to learn when you did it, or what you were trying to, what concept you were trying to grasp. I don't think it's necessary to take it down at all. But yeah, I mean, and it's such a weird example, but if you're using vulgarity or obscenities or anything like that, like in variable names, like you have a variable named balls and you're not talking about golf or a sport or something,
or a game.
Right. If you're talking about testicles, yeah, you may want to maybe not.
Unless it's a medical application.
Yeah, but then you should use testicles and not balls. So fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's good advice.
If you're given an honest, an honest effort, and trying to demonstrate what you've learned and stuff, I don't think there's any reason to pull it down. If it's me, I'm going to look at your most recent ones anyway, because I don't care what you did in 2010 necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
You're cutting me off.
I'm cutting you off now because I want to move on to another one. So here's a good tip from our friend, the best podcast episode summarizer in the world, Chris Tankersley. He says, if you read in a job description something that says, do you think about code in your sleep and spend all your extra time coding? That's a hidden message for, we really want you to work a lot. We want you to work all hours of the day. We want you to be available. We want you to, you come into the office at 8 a.m., work till 5, go home, work from 6 till 10, take a break, work from 11 to midnight. Just like, they want you to work a lot. So I think that's important, is to, in the description and in the words that people are using in job descriptions, look for the hidden messages that kind of will tell you, if you see something that's like works well in high pressure environments, that just tells me that they've got a lot of clients that are going to be pounding on you every day to get the impossible done. So they want you to be Superman, so make sure they pay you to be Superman. Or
they're never going to tell you how it actually is.
Yeah, so
they're never going to say, like, hey, guess what? You're never going home.
Yeah.
And
that's the other thing. That's the other thing about a lot of people are enamored with the Facebook style campuses and the Google campuses and stuff like that. And they're like, wouldn't it be so cool to work at a place that has dry cleaning, a hair cutting place, and a few restaurants and all that stuff, and all of it's free. And I'm like, that's great, but all that is designed to keep you there. Like, that's literally just designed to keep you. If they've got dinner every night at 7 o'clock or 6:30, that means they
You're there.
expect you to be there at 6:30 or 7
Yeah.
o'clock. And to me, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
So, just make sure that whatever the company has, the messages that you find in the job description are going to help you figure out if that's a cultural fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Another example Chris is giving is work well with others probably means that you can't yell at your coworkers for being stupid. And that's probably true, but I don't think that's one of the hidden message ones, right? Like I think it's good to be working with other people, right?
That's your opinion.
That's my opinion. All right, fair enough. So
Let's keep this factual. Let's leave the commentary out.
okay, I'll stop. You got it, boss.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments in the Q&A section that we
I don't see any.
miserably
Chris,
at paying attention to?
Chris Cornett did mention, I think this is a good summary. When it comes to interviewing and finding employment and things like that, Chris said, it's all a numbers game. Unfortunately, you have to play the game to get what you want.
Yeah.
And that kind of just goes back and highlights it is a business. They're trying to get you cheap, and you're trying to get what you think you're worth. And so there is a lot of game playing and politicking and whatnot in order to kind of make sure you find yourself in a situation that's going to be beneficial to you and your employer. So thank you for that comment, Chris. That's spot on. It's so weird calling him Chris. I want to call him Enigma.
Yeah.
That's Enigma who said that.
Yeah, that is Enigma. The Enigma.
The Enigma, the original.
Well,
the
of the
original
PHP community anyway.
The original Tripsy.
He's not going to listen to the podcast ever again now. Okay, so I think that should suffice for episode 13.
Yeah, we're creeping up on 2 hours.
Yeah, I think we should stop talking now. So we're going to do that. That was us talking about interviewing, job descriptions. Episode 13, Loosely Coupled Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Join us next time.
See ya.